months. Hey, good morning, everybody. This is Brittany Jennings coming to you live from the Seniors Blue Book. And today we have the opportunity to sit down with Michelle Robles of Robles Law, PA. So welcome.
Thank you.
How are you today?
I'm doing great. I'm excited to be here.
Awesome. Us too. Could you tell the viewers a little bit about yourself personally and your background and how that led into your law firm?
Sure. I actually took the long route around to get to law school. I actually got a master's degree in accounting first.
Awesome.
Then I went back to law school later in age. I was in my late 30s, and I was able to graduate. I attended Stetson Law for an LLM, which is a Master's of Law in Elder Law. So I decided to go ahead and go for solo practice because I was a paralegal for many years in the estate planning field, and I saw a big need here in Sarasota, especially for attorneys who actually go out to the clients to their home if they're homebound, or to hospital or nursing facilities. So I decided to fill in that niche.
Awesome. And so needed in our area our area is obviously a huge area for care, whatever level of care that looks like. So that's awesome that you go directly to them.
Yes.
That's great.
So we're able to help a lot more people. We keep our rates low so that it can be affordable to everybody.
And that's so important because everybody's working with a particular budget, of course. So tell us maybe something that, before we jump into some educational parts of the video, what's something that maybe viewers wouldn't guess about you?
Oh my gosh. I am actually a stage 3 ovarian cancer survivor.
That's awesome.
And I'm 9 years out. So September is actually ovarian cancer month, which is the reason why I'm wearing teal. So that is another aspect of what led me into this particular field is, everybody needs to have their estate planning documents done in order to not just protect their families, but to protect them while they're still living.
Absolutely. And we were talking that you also, I didn't tell her I was going to bring this up, but about horses. So you used to train horses?
Yes, I used to train horses. I was an equestrian since the age of 9. I used to compete heavily every weekend in show jumping, and then I did all the rodeos on the weekends at night.
That's awesome. I used to go to a youth camp for my church, and it was out in High Springs, and there was this horse trail that you could go on. And it was my first time riding a horse, and so the horses are all following each other, and literally mine kept kind of sniffing the one in front of it a little too closely.
Oh no.
So that one kicked my horse, and mine went up on 2 legs and literally sprinted across this. It was a half a mile. It felt like 10 miles across this field.
Oh,
and I had no idea what to do, and then they're like, pull the reins.
And you're like, what's that?
I'm like, I just needed Michelle to teach me how to ride a horse,
There you go.
So you touched on estate planning, and I think there's, we all know there's a major misconception out there that, that you can't start planning for estate at a young age. Could you get a little bit into that and tell us how, when is the right time to start estate planning?
Sure. The right time is actually as soon as you turn 18. So for a lot of the parents out there that have teenagers or not necessarily teenagers, I'm sorry, kids going off to college, okay, that is a perfect time to actually do at least the basic documents, because parents lose a lot of rights as soon as their child turns 18. So if there was an emergency, if there was a trip to the hospital, they are now covered under HIPAA. So there's a Privacy Act that kicks into gear. So parents lose a lot of their rights. So some of the main estate planning documents that you'll want to do for someone that young is a power of attorney, so the parents can take over the finances if necessary, and also a healthcare surrogate and living will. So that gives them rights to talk to the doctors, look at medical records. So that is definitely something important for someone that at least turns the age of 18. Now, as soon as you hit your 20s, you should actually think about getting a will. And as soon as you purchase property, you'll want to consider getting a trust.
Okay. So basically, I needed to do this. I won't count how many exact years ago, but definitely something that we need to consider because, we think of, let's say seniors, and I think of, I guess, before being in this industry that, it wouldn't be till somebody's maybe in their 60s or 50s or 60s that they would come see you for that.
Yeah, and that's a very common misconception. Let me give you an example. When I was 34 years old, I ended up in the hospital because I thought I had gallstones. Mm-hmm. Well, it turned out to be stage 3 cancer. So we had a major wake-up call. Okay, so I had already been a paralegal for a couple of years, and it turned out that I didn't have any of my estate planning documents done. My husband didn't even know how to pay the bills, access the online banking. So my mom actually, thank God, I was able to step in for that part. But we could have been in a very bad situation very quickly. Mm-hmm. So what happens is people typically don't think about doing their estate planning until there's an emergency.
Right.
And when that emergency arises, it could be that you are no longer with capacity enough to sign those documents. So the earlier you do it, the better.
Being proactive versus reactive.
Absolutely.
Like you said, we always talk about the word crisis, and it seems like sometimes that's what it takes for us to actually put something into action like this.
Absolutely. And the typical people that I see in my law office are someone who's already lost somebody mm-hmm. or had that type of emergency. So now they're being proactive, and thank God they're able to do that at that moment. But usually I get the phone calls, someone had a blunt force trauma to the head, they're no longer with capacity, and now they want to do that person's documents, and that's not how it works.
Right. So definitely be proactive, and I guess that's pre-planning.
Pre-planning is key.
And so I guess since when you turn 18. So all the viewers out there with kids, make sure you're doing that. I want to talk about guardianship.
Yes.
How can we avoid guardianship? Because in our industry, that seems to be a little bit of a trigger word, because it sometimes can be an emergency guardianship, and we want to be able to avoid that.
Yeah, and I would say 90% of the time it is an emergency. Mm-hmm. And the reason for that is because someone did not do their power of attorney ahead of time, or their healthcare documents. Mm-hmm. So that is the way to avoid guardianships. So there's 2 different types of guardianships. One is for property, and one is for healthcare decisions. So the way to avoid the property guardianship is by having that power of attorney. Mm-hmm. You are selecting who you want to be in charge of your finances, your property. That takes the control away from the court system, because guardianships, you have to go to the court system, and it can be very time consuming, it can be very expensive. There's 3 attorneys involved, there's a committee to see if you have capacity or not, what you're able to handle. So you're taking away that power from the court system, and you're deciding who you want to put in place.
Right, because otherwise it might be somebody in the hospital that's had an event, and now they're needing a guardian, and you've got this whole process to go through that can really hold things up.
Absolutely. And for example, we have a family member, it's a different state, so I'm not going to mention names so I can talk about them. And their youngest son, 26 years old, decided to take some drugs, and he kind of mixed things together, and he's now in a persistent vegetative state. Mm. So if he had those documents in place, they would have been able to pull the plug if that was what his wishes were.
Right.
He would have had to say so as what his wishes would be. The other thing is that we were now dealing with little kids that were left behind.
Right.
We were dealing with a parent who did not have the financial means to take care of him. Plus now, because he's in a vegetative state, a guardianship has to be done. Mm-hmm. So things can get very complicated very quickly. So trying to piece all these crisis management options together at the last minute and quickly so that this kid can get the care that he needs, that's very tough.
And it's already so traumatizing, the actual, whether it's a health event or whatever it may be that's happened to, so family members having to make decisions or to be, I don't know the words, blocked by a guardianship or the process of it.
Exactly.
It just adds so much stress and emotional.
Yeah, it does. And the families are already dealing with a traumatic event, and now they're having to deal with all this other stuff that they really didn't have to think about before.
Right.
So you're trying to, go through the motions and kind of grieve. And then you're also having to deal with all these other responsibilities, and it's quite overwhelming.
Exactly. Could you talk to us about the difference between a will and a trust?
Sure. So I like to think of a will as instructions to the court system on where you want your property to go to. Okay, so we're talking about tangible personal property such as jewelry, furniture, automobiles, jet skis, whatever it is that you may have. And then you're also making a decision as far as like real estate. We look at, on a separate note, we look at like all your banking, all your financial accounts, make sure that there's beneficiaries involved. That way everything can transition. It'll have to go through probate, but it'll transition a little bit easier. On the other hand, a trust is a vehicle to try to avoid probate as much as possible. And that is by the trust owning the property. I like to think of it as a basket. So your trust is a basket, and you're putting all of your assets into the name of the trust. So that way it's an easier process to transfer that basket over to your beneficiaries.
To avoid probate.
To avoid probate.
Okay, because I know I've in the past done a little bit of, or had a little bit of experience with that when I've worked in communities where, something happens to a family member and then it goes into probate for,
months.
Yeah, I was going to say, I feel like it was like about 9 or 10 months.
Yeah.
And, they were trying to pay the assisted living community and they couldn't. Their hands were tied because the money went to probate.
Exactly.
Or went through probate. So trust is how you can, like you said, I like that. It's a basket.
It's a basket. So in that type of situation, things that were not titled correctly, like into a trust or having a beneficiary put on it, goes through the probate process, and that can take up to 6 to 9 months, sometimes even longer. I've seen probates go into a couple of years because we're trying to sell some type of property. And if you didn't title your assets correctly, it doesn't avoid probate. Your money actually has to go through probate, which means you're opening it up to creditors to be able to place a claim against those monetary funds. So that's also something to think about. So when you come talk to a estate planning attorney, we're going to look at the full picture. We have to look at the full picture. I know a lot of people like to keep their stuff private, but that's not the moment to do it. You definitely want to see what the full picture is so we can advise you correctly to avoid probate as much as possible.
Absolutely. And every client that you see is different. Everybody has a different story, so you adapt obviously a plan to what their needs are and goals.
Yeah, exactly. Estate planning should not be cookie cutter. It should be customized.
She said cookies, and I want cookies.
I do too.
Darn you, keto. But yeah, that makes total sense.
Yeah.
And is there any maybe last words of advice that you'd like to give viewers today as we close out?
Don't wait till you're in your 60s or 70s to do your estate planning. Do it early. It's not just because I would like the business. I definitely would. But it's for your protection, so plan ahead, try to be as organized as possible during the process, and just open yourself to see what the benefits are of estate planning early is.
Exactly. Just make an appointment to at least have a step 1, which is a consultation.
Absolutely. And most attorneys do give free consultations. I know I do.
Okay.
And then of course our rates are affordable.
Awesome. And your office is in Sarasota, so I'll make sure that I put the address and the phone number. But what areas do you cover? Like when you mentioned kind of going out to the different environments.
So I'm located right in central Sarasota, near the Sarasota Square Mall. So we are easily reachable by everybody in Bradenton and all the way down to Venice and Inglewood. So we actually cover this whole area.
Perfect. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. I know myself and the viewers, we've definitely learned a lot from you, and it puts that fire under your feet a little bit to come in and start, get everything started. So thanks everybody for tuning in. Again, this is Seniors Blue Book Live and with Michelle Robles, and we hope you have a great day.
Thank you. Take care.